Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Rêve Health Way, our podcast. I am Madeline Cunningham, and we are here today with Julie Elaine Brown, who is our co-founder and CEO. And we're going to be going over Julie's health story today because it is so crazy and so compelling and a big reason why Rêve Health was formed. So a few years ago, Julie, you almost died. So
Yeah.
tell me a little bit about that experience.
Yeah, it's crazy. So it's March 31st, 2022, and I had been waiting. So I don't know anybody who knows anything about Boston, but it was taking so long to get an appointment post COVID that I had been on the wait list for more than a year for this specialty doctor. And I almost canceled the appointment that day because I was hemorrhaging. I was bleeding so much that I thought I couldn't even get dressed and get in an Uber to go to this appointment. And I'm really glad I did because when I was there, it wasn't a joke. I actually really was hemorrhaging. And I had to have an emergency surgery that day. They had an ultrasound, and not for total TMI, but I think it's important. I mean, I was bleeding so much that they had to bring in a mop. And then the my surgeon said, "You can't leave. You have to
Mm,
have a surgery right now. And we can't let you go home because you will not survive."
oh my
So
God.
yeah, so that was a big day. Like 3.5 years
Was a
in.
big day, and that was the day that they found your fibroids.
Yeah, so the ultrasound revealed a couple of things. It revealed this one fibroid that had already detached or partially detached from the uterine wall, and it was on its way out, and that was what was causing this severe bleeding. So that was coming out one way or another. And they also found a 16 centimeter fibroid, which is enormous. It's like almost a watermelon size. Um, and and a bunch of other little fibroids.
Mm.
So what I was told that day with the ultrasound, I mean, I get this ultrasound, I'm sitting on a towel in the doctor's office after the ultrasound. They had a trash bag under me and a towel.
Oh my God.
Really, really great. And the doctor wrote this. I have it here. Actually, I don't know where it is actually, but I have she drew like this little kind of Mickey Mouse thing. She drew my uterus and showed where the fibroids was. It looked like Mickey Mouse ears. And she said, "We have to give you a hysterectomy. Please sign this paperwork." And
Oh my gosh.
yeah. So that's first of all, when you're sitting there, and obviously I wasn't feeling very well, it's like 8:30 in the morning, and anybody who knows me knows that that's not usually a time that I like, but it was pretty overwhelming and I didn't even know what to do. I didn't even know if there was anybody like I could text or get a hold of at that time in the morning to be like, "Wait a minute, what do I do here?" But I knew that I didn't want to lose an organ. And so I said, "Is there anything that can be done? I understand that like this one emergency thing is happening. Can we just work on that and then address the bigger picture later?" And my doctor agreed. She didn't really understand why. She was like, it's so much simpler for you to just have this one surgery. You'll be in and out. You can go home tomorrow or the next day. And the other way, you're going to have two surgeries. But I didn't believe that. So I think for me, it's like, let me just address this emergency situation. And I'll tell you why I didn't believe it in a second. But I was like, I'm going to figure out this second part at another time when I'm not actively dying, which
Oh
I
my
think was
gosh.
fair. But the reason I didn't believe it is because for 7 years, I had gone to many doctors and said, "I'm gaining weight. My periods are getting heavier and heavier. I'm losing hair. All these issues are happening." Every single doctor, everyone in San Francisco, New York, Boston said, "I'm fine." And it was normal
Yeah.
perimenopause, that I can't expect to still look and feel like I did when I was 20, very dismissive. I hadn't changed anything about my diet or my exercise. And when I say they were not normal periods, it was like crime scenes, right?
Well, I
Where,
was gonna say, let's back up here because these fibroids that were clearly big in size. I mean, describing a watermelon sized fibroid, that was just one of the fibroids that you were
yeah,
dealing with, leading to an emergency surgery, the recommendation of a hysterectomy. I mean, this all happened within a day, being on the wait list to see the specialist. So take me back to the beginning.
Yeah.
What were the first signs and symptoms that you were experiencing? Was there a time that you could pinpoint, something is maybe feeling a little bit off here? Tell me a little bit about that.
Actually, it's interesting. I don't think I've been asked the exact day, and I had to think about it right now, but I was 42 and I was walking in Marina del Rey on the beach. And I was walking and I felt like the period coming on that was so heavy. And within, I'm going to say, less than 30 seconds, I knew that I had a really serious problem and I had to immediately exit and go home. And like I remember just this like 5-minute walk back to the car, like on the beach, and I'm carrying my dog, and it's like, okay, I'm literally bleeding so much, and it was like people don't want to talk about it, and it's so uncomfortable, and I felt like I couldn't really say this to my friends, but it's like huge clots and just like a water pitcher of blood that comes out. And there's nothing you can do about it. You literally can't leave the house. And that started at like 42. And then I had another incident back in San Francisco because I was traveling back and forth where I think I told you this story where I bled in the elevator and I had to clean myself up at home and then go rush to the elevator of this building and like spray it down with paper towels with my one neighbor who was always super nosy. And it's like, oh, hey, nothing's going on here. It just looks like I murdered somebody in the elevator. But I laugh about it now, but these things were happening to the point where I was afraid to travel for work. I was afraid to go on dates. I was I was in a relationship. I couldn't do anything, couldn't go out. And I just kind of normalized it because all these doctors were nobody can make you feel anything, but if you have like 4 doctor's appointments and all 4 say, you're really overreacting, this is completely normal, you can't expect to look the same, all this stuff. And I had gained something like 20 pounds. It was maybe not quite 20 at that point. It was like 15 to 16 pounds, which is still a ridiculous amount of weight within a year without changing anything. And
Mhm.
all these doctors were telling me that that was normal. And it wasn't because I had a 16-centimeter fibroid. Interestingly enough, I lost like 10 pounds immediately after that surgery. So,
Yeah, of course, telling you it had nothing to do with it. So what I'm hearing is that we started to experience increased symptoms with your cycles.
yeah.
And maybe it was something that you have this one specific memory being at the beach where it was, this is a key memory of where I knew something was wrong. Maybe things were gradually leading up to that. And the years following, it sounds like gradually increasing worsened symptoms and continuing to be proactive and go to doctors and research and say what's going on and being dismissed.
So I think it's interesting. It's like, yes, I was proactive, but yes and no. So at
Mm,
the very beginning, I was like, there is something really wrong. And I, booked appointments with all the top specialists. And I started with UCSF and then San Francisco and, that network, went to a concierge doctor. And after 3 or 4 appointments where they're all saying the same thing, and maybe you're just really anxious and maybe you need some Lexapro and making me feel like I'm the problem. I just wasn't interested anymore in that. So what I did at that point, but I still knew something was wrong. So I was trying to really clean my diet up. I don't eat processed food and I'm a vegetarian, but I started adding in some fish, some like wild salmon, starting to increase the omega-3s. I was trying to do more Mediterranean diet, which it always kind of had been. But then I was like Okinawan diet, trying to really clean up that. And then even for exercise, like I had been, my minor is exercise physiology in college for undergrad. So I was like, okay, well, maybe this whole like not doing HIIT, like high intensity training, that's not working for me. The cold plunges aren't working. So just intuitively, I started or I stopped doing some of the biohacky things like
mm.
cold plunge or whatever was going on, like tons and tons of strength training. That wasn't working for me anyway because I was weak. I was anemic.
Yeah.
Well, so that was another interesting thing too. One doc, I was like, listen, I think I'm anemic and I'd like to have a blood test to check my iron, right? So I couldn't even get that test. But then when I ended up getting it on my own, they said, "You're anemic because you're a vegetarian." I was like, "No, I've been a vegetarian since I was 12. I've never been anemic. I'm anemic because I have like pictures of blood coming out of me."
Right,
So,
exactly.
right. So, and then they'd be like, "Well, did you go to medical school?" And I'm like, "No, but it doesn't seem like clearly if I'm losing this much blood,
Yeah,
that."
1 + 1 is not equal to 2 here. I'm not really seeing what's going on.
Well, there were some moments where I'm just like, yeah, I know I didn't go to medical school, but I do know my body and this isn't
Mhm.
normal. And then also, I mean, people aren't idiots. I mean, people know, when we're eating healthy and when we're feeling right and when something's off. So there was a couple of moments, but I think I like kind of gave up on seeing professionals for a while.
Mm,
It didn't
I
even
see.
matter if they were holistic because I was just so done with experts telling me something, or even more so, especially at my age, there's this whole thing where other women my age were like, "No, we've accepted it. Why can't you?"
Mhm.
So I felt very diminished on every level. So I kind of just normalized it. I mean, I was 49 by the time I had the surgeries, and that's crazy.
Yeah, but you can see how all of this effort into going to specialists to try to get answers, and this is such an unfortunate common story, and then having your symptoms not be taken seriously, having being put into an age bracket and saying, this explains everything, kind of be on your way.
Yeah.
It can be really demoralizing and defeating. How many times can you run into the fire? But then it leads to you trying to feel like you have to handle this all on your own, which is also very sad and a lot of pressure.
Yeah, and so I think one thing that started happening is intuitively, and I had gone to see my cousin who's an acupuncturist and got some Chinese herbs. Intuitively, I was like, okay, well, the one thing that I haven't really tried yet that I used to do like way back when in my 20s and 30s was a lot of acupuncture and more of the TCM. And I wanted to try that because I had done some research saying that, in Japan and in China, fewer women experience vasomotor symptoms or even these perimenopause symptoms. I was like, what's going on there? There's this trend. And then I was trying to reverse my biological age as a way to also step back time. And there were some hidden keys there that I really liked the methodology of like, we're going to treat like, it's not just, oh, you have fibroids because you're old. I didn't know I had fibroids, by the way, but I had intuited that I had something, like something was going on and you can feel it. But then, so I did have one acupuncturist say, I think you have fibroids. And I hadn't had an ultrasound to confirm that at that point, but the ultrasound obviously confirmed a lot. But she was like, "Let me try this." I was able after that first surgery, and you and I have talked about this too. I reduced that fibroid from 16 centimeters to 14 centimeters because of TCM. That was the only, I didn't change. They changed the diet a little bit because I didn't realize how inflammatory dairy was. Like you think I would have done that, but I, I had to cut the dairy. I mean, for me, and then also a lot of gluten and other things that like some other blood markers hadn't showed up that like I was piecemealing things together, right? So I had to address one tiny thing, but then the other thing, something else would come up. But for 6 months, I was trying to reduce the fibroid, that big 16 centimeter one, to avoid another surgery.
Mhm.
And, the reality is, I probably could have, had I started it when I was 42, I don't think I would have had any of the surgeries. And
Well,
I
that
don't,
was my next question. Do you
yeah,
feel like if you had these interventions, at 42, if you had gone to a practitioner, like after that day on the beach, as you described, if you
yeah.
had gone to someone who has a comparable approach that we take at Rev, would you
I
think
mean,
you'd be in the same position?
obviously, I mean, it's like one of the reasons we started Rev, right? Like, I know that first of all, I needed all the biomarkers because it would have showed that it's not just some like, oh, I'm just going to put you in a perimenopause category, that there were serious problems going on, right? And it's like, what is causing the fibroids? Like the inflammation and the toxins, like that was never even talked about. Myomectomy surgeries, which is what I have a very high prevalence rate of going back. You go back. And the doctors were like, we'll see you again in 3 years. I'm like, no, you won't, because I'm going to address the root cause of this. I'm going to fix this problem. But hands down, absolutely. If I had had screening, 100%, if I had had screening, I would have known.
Mhm.
And I would have known that there was a problem. I likely would have been able, with Chinese herbs, supplements, diet, lifestyle changes, certainly exercise changes too, reducing my stress, which nobody had ever talked about. Running companies, super stressful, being in a toxic relationship, all of the things that like needed to kind of get eradicated that I was piecing together. But yeah, hands down, I wouldn't have had the surgeries because it wouldn't have gotten to the point where it was 16 centimeters.
Right.
And so when one of my favorite doctors at Brigham and Women's, he was great because there were some alternatives with like sound wave therapy and ways that I didn't have to like be cut open and have something removed. But he's like, it's too far gone. It's too big. And so for him to say that, and then I was like, okay, so I've reduced this thing 2 centimeters in 6 months. So if I had actually, what size do we think it was back, 6, 7 years ago? And he was like, I don't know, maybe 5 or 6 centimeters. I'm like, yeah. And I could have gotten down to 4 centimeters in 6 months. So maybe 2 centimeters in a year. Maybe it would have been eradicated with 18 months of work.
Yeah, absolutely. How do
Yeah.
you feel, like, even when you say that, knowing that reality could have been different, like, how do you feel
I'm
acknowledging?
like, I'm actually really pissed off. Like,
Yeah,
I
I bet.
I feel like sometimes we talk about this. It's like, why did we create the company? I'm like, well, I had like this. I was mad. I
Mhm.
mean, I literally, like, not only did I almost die, I spent tons of money out of pocket. I didn't have answers. I was dismissed. My consultancy and my work was affected because I couldn't travel. My relationships were affected. My life was like much smaller than it should have been for 7 years. And then I had the surgery. So the first surgery wasn't that bad. I mean, it was like I got picked up that night
Yep.
birth. But I mean, I still had a surgery. I couldn't like get up the next morning and be like, I'm going to go running. But that was maybe like 2 or 3 weeks of recovery. And then I just like really was healing with like the acupuncture and Chinese herbs and the diet and the exercise. And I was getting out in the sun and I reran my biomarkers. And suddenly my iron levels, even though I still had this big other, problem, my iron levels were tracking back up. It's actually funny because I went like 4 times over the course of 6 weeks and I kept running my labs. I had to pay out of pocket for some of it. And you can just see all the levels going up. And I'm like, how interesting, that like the fibroid that is causing lots of bleeding is gone. And now my iron levels are normal. Wow.
That's
So
right.
yeah, so that these kind of funny things where I'm like, data, you say this, labs don't lie. I'm like,
Mm,
data doesn't lie. It's
data
there.
doesn't lie. So
Yeah.
you had this first emergency surgery. That was to really rectify this like acute emergent situation. You were hemorrhaging to death. In that moment, there was an opportunity to have a hysterectomy, to
Yeah. Yeah.
have one surgery to resolve it all. And in that moment, you chose not to. So tell me a little bit about like what was the hesitation there in the moment? What did maintaining your uterus mean to you? Tell me a little bit about that part of this whole picture.
Oh yeah. Did we not talk about that at the beginning?
You mentioned it.
So, I mean, it's what, well, so I think for me, losing an organ did not seem to make sense as the first line of healing. It's very dramatic, right? And I know, I know men who have had tumors or issues with and it's like, you're not recommending removing an organ as the first line. I think if I hadn't been 49, nobody would have recommended that as the first thing. If I was 39 or 29, certainly. And so for me, that felt really offensive.
Mm,
And I, a lot of doctors, and actually one nurse practitioner was like, you have to accept this at some point that you're going to go into menopause. I was like, right, but not today. And I want to go in, I want it to be natural, a natural transition. I don't want to have it be a chemical menopause. I wake up and one day there's an organ gone. And it's also touted as this surgery that solves all these problems, but it solves one problem. For sure, it would have solved the fibroid problem because there's no place for them to live. But actually, that's not completely true because some of them were outside of the uterus. But it solves that problem, but not. But there's a bunch of other things that nobody talks about. Like you can have vaginal prolapse. It can cause depression, anxiety. It's rapid aging, especially when it's the chemical menopause. And you have to go on HRT for the rest of your life, hormone replacement therapy, which I did not want to do. So it's one decision that led to like a whole slew of other things. I was not prepared at that time to make that decision. So even having a really good doctor to say, but also I think she knew, I was like, I will walk out of here. Like, I'm not getting this done. Like, and she's like, well, you really can't because you're going to die. And I was like, no, but I really can because I'm not going to have that surgery. And I'm not going to sign that paperwork.
Yeah.
I'm just like, I don't want to do that. And so I feel like they got a sense of like, okay, we're dealing with somebody who's got some opinions. But I think for me, it was also this belief that I could eradicate the other issues in a different way. Now it turned out that I couldn't. So I was able to reduce the size. I was able to feel a lot better. I was able to like hair clumping and coming out and my like little hedgehog of hair. That was pretty much eradicated in those 6 months as well. So I fixed a lot of the symptoms before even this other surgery. But carrying around a watermelon-sized fibroid, which affected how I walked and how I worked out and clearly how I looked, that was not cool. Some people were like, why do it now that you don't have like the bleeding wasn't as much? But it was still there and still awful. And it was just this heaviness. Plus, it's like knowing that you have this. I mean, I used to call one of my friends and I called it the demon baby. this like huge fiber, right? So, and then I had the MRI, which showed exactly what it looked like. You can't look at that and then just be like, oh, I'm going to just accept it. I mean, I couldn't. I know some people can, but for me, I do not regret. And then I chose to have the big abdominal myomectomy. And this is, I mean, so over more than 80% of women in their 40s have fibroids. So these questions are coming up for a lot of women like, do I have a hysterectomy? Do I have a fibroid surgery? I do not regret getting even 2 fibroid surgeries. I don't.
Well, that was my next question for you. Even in the past 6 months, year, we've talked to so many women who have been in similar positions that you're in, where their doctors may be recommending a hysterectomy, that they have known fibroids coming up. So if you could give any pieces of advice to anyone who's in a similar health position, what are you saying to these women who feel really confused and feel like they don't have a lot of options?
I mean, first, I think obviously Rêve is a really good solution because, I mean, get your labs, see what's really going on and try to address the root cause, because it's so dismissive to just be like, oh, it's a hormonal imbalance. As you know, and you treat, there's always something else going on. The whole story needs to be looked into. But I would also say hysterectomy is a valid option if you just want to be done with that thing. But just go into it with open eyes, knowing that there are side effects. And doctors often don't talk about those side effects, but they are real and they are very serious. And you likely don't have a choice but to be on HRT. So if you want to avoid that, you should know that that's what's coming for you if you have that surgery. And obviously, if you have to have the surgery. So in my research, almost 600,000 hysterectomies done every year that are unnecessary for women between 40 and 50. Medically unnecessary, meaning if you have cancer and you have uterine cancer, you're going to need a hysterectomy. That is a medically necessary procedure. But otherwise, there's options. There's other surgeries. They are harder to perform. They cost hospitals more money. They require specialists, and insurance companies don't like it. So, you're really dealing with a lot when you ask for an alternative, because the standard procedure and, the standard care for this age bracket is the hysterectomy. So as you know, whenever you're going off the standard operating procedure, which is the thing for doctors and hospitals. Whenever you're going off the book, it's, you're paving a path there, and not all doctors and not all hospitals want to go there. But I do think you can ask, and you can find somebody, you can advocate for yourself. It's okay to fire your doctor, as you've said.
That's right.
If they dismiss you. I have personally, through Rev, of course, we've done this, but like personally, I've saved like at least 5 women from not getting hysterectomies. I feel like I'm saving you, but to get a myomectomy, and nobody has regretted that. So the myomectomy for me, like the abdominal myomectomy, it is a procedure. It's a C-section. It was really, it did take some recovery time. But what I would say is like working with, so for example, with us, like if we know somebody's going through a myomectomy or going to have that procedure, it is actually really important to make sure your diet, your exercise plan, your stress levels, like that we can help you be as healthy as possible. It's so funny. A lot of people want to wait until after the surgery to heal. We talked about that, but it's like, first of all, surgery is dangerous.
Yeah, it is super dangerous, and preparing for it. I mean, just as you said, I think people think that because they're in the state that they're in, they can kind of just pause and the surgery will be the answer to that problem. But you preparing for that surgery is essential to your recovery. So I'm so glad you brought that up.
Essential to the recovery, but also essential to the surgery, like you waking up and feeling good. So obviously, I could be like, oh, I was going to have a surgery. What's the difference between 16 centimeters and 14 centimeters? Well, it was a big enough difference that I was on the operating table 5.5 hours versus 7,
Mm-hmm.
right? And the longer that you're under, and the recovery time, the bounce back time. So I have a funny story about that too. So I was supposed to be there so it depends on what it is, but it was a pretty major, I mean, it was like a C-section, and it was a huge fibroid and multiple little ones being lifted out of me. And my surgeon said that when she took it out, and the big one in one big piece, and clanked it on the table, and it made this like boom sound. It's just like, even the anesthesiologist was like, oh my God. So I'm like, oh man, like the behind the scenes of my operating procedure, right? Like you're like, wait a minute, what was it really like when I was under? But she showed me I have a picture of this terrible thing. And so, but anyway, so the demon, so that thing that had come out of me, but it could have been much worse, right? So it's right. So anything that you can do to make that better. But because it was so big, they didn't want me out they wanted me to stay overnight for 2 nights. So I had the procedure on a Thursday night, and then they wanted me to leave Saturday morning. Well, I was not having that. So I actually left at 1 p.m. the next day. So I think this is really important too for people to remember. Like I woke up and informed at 4 o'clock in the morning, informed the nurse who was working. I was like, this catheter needs to go. And she was like, no, and then she's like, wait a minute. Your records say from the surgeon, it's like, she's going to want that catheter out. And I was like, yes, I am. So I mean, it was like, can you get up? Can you actually get up with assistance, walk to the bathroom? But can you, I mean, this is again TMI, can you pee on your own? And
Mm-hmm.
if you can, we'll keep the catheter out. And if you can't, so I was like, I'm doing it. Right. So even the fact, so again, think about how strong, like I had strong abs. Some people are like, oh, you shouldn't build out your abs before you have an abdominal surgery. No, 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 you should, because it'll recover faster. So I had built up my abs. I was like super in shape. I built up my arms. I knew what I was going to need when I had this surgery. I needed to like be able to lift myself. I needed to be able to be strong enough, like strong hamstrings to get up from, like, God help you if you fall over after that surgery. You gotta be able to get yourself.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
People don't talk about the practicality of the surgery, but so even with that, the fact that I like was able to get up, walk to the bathroom like 7 hours after a surgery, and just even the willpower too, where I was like, this is happening. And I remember I was like, you got to give me a couple minutes. She's like, I'll give you a couple minutes. And I was like, oh, this has to happen. But it did. And I was so happy. And so then she's like, wow, you can actually, we're discharging you. And I got discharged, it was less than 24 hours after the surgery. So
Mm.
so it's crazy, right? But it's not. So when people say, oh, I'm going to just put it on pause, why would you do that? the healthier you can be even before something like that. But what we've seen, even with our members, is you might not need that surgery
Hmm.
because a 16 centimeter, although we do know people who've had, but it is more unusual.
Hmm.
They're usually 5, 6, before they start bothering people. And if you're coming to see us, for example, when it's, earlier in the stages, you might not need to go down that route.
Yeah, that's right. That's when more of the alternative therapies, like even your doctors had mentioned to you early on, the sound wave therapies, the acupuncture, the herbal medicine can be much more effective if it's caught earlier on through lab testing.
And there are alternatives. I wrote a blog about it at one point. There's like UFE, which is uterine fibroid embolization, and that basically uses plastic balls to like stop things. Well, I'm a very natural person. So for me, like, I'm not going to stick plastics and like to stop the blood flow of something. And there were other issues. Then there's like morcellation type of technologies where you don't have to cut the way that you do. But for me, with that, my surgeon really felt like, to make sure that everything was 100% out, like the best way was just, opening it up. And I don't regret that surgery. But yeah, I mean, a month later, I hiked a mountain. So this is another thing too, where to be in shape. And it's funny too, like a lot of our members are really very, very healthy. But then if they find out that they do have something, they're like, okay, maybe I'll wait. But nobody regrets not wait. Nobody regrets like making the steps.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I completely agree with you. And I'm going to ask you a little bit of an on the spot question. So this is a deeper one. But, I know we talked about like the lessons and the advice, to give to women who are in similar positions. But I guess if we can take almost like a bird's eye view of your health journey, starting from the early 40s, seeing where you are today, what are a few things that you feel like this healing journey taught you? Like, how did we transform physically, emotionally, that really brought you to where you are today? Like, what has this health healing journey taught you?
Oh, that's a loaded question. Well, so
It
I mean,
is.
I do believe that had I not gone through this, I'm not sure I would have, met you, and then together we created Rêve. So that I am grateful for this journey because of that. And then even getting acupuncture with you. And then of course you were developing a whole business and protocols. And then together we're like, wait a minute, let's do this and help so many other people with the root cause healing. It helped me define my purpose.
Mm,
As a consultant, I was a very successful consultant and had really top clients and made a lot of money. But this now I can have conversations with our members and be like, I'm helping them potentially avoid a surgery, or like even like some of the members that we have, that are the men, and like optimizing their exercise routine when they just didn't think they could, or they were at a stage where maybe they couldn't get any better, or they're getting older. So like, how could they possibly perform the way that they did with their 30? Well, maybe you can, right? So like being able to optimize, and working with you to help people feel really great. So that's amazing, right? So would I have come up with this without that journey? Probably not, because I think when you're complacent, or you don't address anything, or you don't kind of go through this, maybe I was just kind of not really living my life. So I feel like I've fully woken up. And when
mm,
had that happen, you can't really go back to sleep of like, oh, well, I'm going to ignore it. However, I do think that but that said, I don't want anybody else to have to experience this. Like, yes, okay, you can have like this, you can find your life purpose in other ways, right? You don't have to almost die. But that is a good way to find your purpose. But you don't have to go down that path. It's not a good way, but it's a way to find your purpose. But I think that what I want everybody to have is to not have to go through that, because
mm,
my life was small for almost a decade. I had healing journeys and surgeries and spent a ton of money, and didn't, and just basically put my whole life on the back burner and accepted complacency. And I also accepted feeling kind of okay. for a
I
really long
know.
time.
Powerful. Yeah, this difference between, I mean, and I think this is so common for so many people when, especially something is a little bit more gradual and a little bit more insidious. It's not like you wake up one day and you have the flu. Like there's such a stark difference between I felt great to I feel terrible.
Yeah.
What I'm hearing is this gradual decline in feeling of vibrancy. And now being on the other side of it, I mean, I guess that is my next question. Being on the other side of this, having a few years now to recover, how do you feel differently now?
I mean, so I can do whatever I want every day. And
Mm,
that's the biggest thing. So I think we forget, we're very good, by the way, at forgetting how bad something is, because otherwise, people, it would be hard to like live life if you're always focusing on the negative. But there was 7 years of my life where you could wake up and be like, I don't know if I can go hiking today. I don't know if I can walk my dog. I don't know whether or not I can go out to dinner. I don't know whether or not I can get on a plane. And the mental bandwidth of having to prepare for an event or seeing somebody or going on a business trip, I don't have any of that anymore. So when I wake up every day, I feel pretty great every day. I can always go for a hike with my dog. I can always like go see friends. I can jump on a plane. There are no restrictions. And I think we forget that. So even when we were coming up with this tagline, it was like the life you want is possible. A lot of people forget that it really is, because you normalize feeling kind of shitty every day
that's
or
right.
not optimal. So unless it's acute, right? So this is where we've talked about this too. Like for me, the like the blood, that kind of like I would call, the water pitcher, or I call them the Dexter days, the crime scene days.
Extra days, yes.
So I like made a joke about it. I mean, I had normalized it to the point where I like laughed about it with some people. But I remember a couple of times just being like, oh yeah, I mean, there were some times that were really, really awful. And then the next day it wouldn't be. So I'd be like, oh, well, now today's okay.
Mm,
So, all right, I'm all right. Or like now this day. And then I remember for a while it would be like that, but like 10 days a month. And so I was like,
mm,
well, that's only, it's only like 1/3 of the month. Like I look back on that, I'm like, how like,
yeah.
so if you had like debilitating back pain, or debilitating migraines 10 days out of the month, like most people would like take bigger action. But I think for something like this, it was like it wasn't bad enough
Mhm.
that I was like, this needs to be solved right now. But I wish I had I wish I had listened to my gut instinct. That was the other thing too. That's another thing I keep telling people is I appreciate it. If somebody had 13 years of medical school and all that training, I appreciate it. But I've been living in my body now for almost 52 years. I know my body. And so if I say something's not normal, it's not normal for
That's right.
me.
That's right. I mean, what a mic drop moment, I feel like, is a really big culmination of your experience. Yes, this helped you find your purpose. Yes, your purpose is helping other women, especially, avoid things like this. If your purpose is creating a business that really helps people understand their health better, and your own personal journey of trusting your intuition and trusting your gut. I mean, your story is so compelling. It's so beautiful. And I'm obviously so grateful that you made it on the other side and that you're here today. Do you feel like you have any last parting words while we wrap up sharing your story?
I can't wait for us to share your story.
It's it will be here soon.
I know. But yeah, that's it. I would say that if you suspect something's wrong, then something's wrong.
Mm, absolutely. Make
Get the
sure you get
screening.
labs. Work with us if it resonates.
Yeah, get your labs and understand the big picture, because a lot of people have gotten labs here and there and they still aren't addressing, and so it comes back. They can fix a problem and it comes back.
That's right. Well, thank you so much, Julie. I so appreciate you being so vulnerable and sharing. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. And we will see you on our next episode of the Rêve Health Way.
Woo! Thanks.